I am honored and excited to be here with a true leader in Capitol Hill as it relates to digital assets, Congressman French Hill. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to start with a very basic question. But can you explain to us why you think the U.S. must regulate digital assets and lead in this space?
Yeah. Well, first, I appreciate Digital Chamber being here in Washington this week, because this is a critical week for you to communicate with members of the House about the use case, the future, digital innovation, and what we need to do to move our country forward in Web3, blockchain, and the digital future. Critical, because next week on the House floor, we will have our FIT 21 bill, which lays out and removes the uncertainty around raising money and doing work in digital assets. It's been terrible for the last decade, and we've worked mightily for the last few years to find consensus, Democrats and Republicans, where we can direct the CFTC and the SEC and the banking regulators how to handle the future digital asset space. And it's been tough over the last couple of years to reach that consensus, but I think we have, and I want to thank everybody in the Digital Chamber that's here in Washington this week or listening online for all their help to make that happen.
I was joking.
We want to reduce uncertainty. We want to spur innovation. We want capital in the United States. We're the technological and economic leader in the world, in the past and today, and we want to maintain that when we think about that in a Web3 context.
It seems like common sense. We want clarity.
This is Washington. You use the word common sense.
I was joking backstage. It's almost like we planned to have this summit and have all of the digital asset and blockchain community come to DC while we're moving the first comprehensive regulatory bill for this space in Congress. So you're a sponsor of the Fit for the 21st Century Act. You mentioned it. It hopefully is moving next week. I think a lot of folks in this room are optimistic that we'll see a bipartisan vote, especially after the vote on the joint resolution to repeal SAB 121.
Right.
What are you expecting for next week's vote? What are you expecting for this bill moving forward?
Right. Well, this bill has been put together over the last year and a half, working with Democrats and Republicans at a building block basis. Like, let's legislate a statutory solution to the mystery in and around the Howey test. Can we find consensus on that? Can we find consensus on how to define a functioning blockchain and algorithm that's decentralized? Can we direct the CFTC, which needs statutory authority for the spot market for Bitcoin? They've requested that. The Biden administration has requested that. We've put that in this bill. We've put funding in this bill for the CFTC to operate in this arena, because this is very different for the CFTC. They don't operate in the same disclosure investor relationship way that the SEC has. And so that's an extensive issue. But I'm optimistic, and I expect strong Democratic support. It's almost generational. Younger Democrats recognizing the need for innovation, technological leadership, the decentralized nature of reducing friction, reducing agency costs that are embedded in financial services in and around using blockchain and a digital approach. I think they see that. And so I think they're more biased that this should be a yes. And then on behalf of the Biden administration, they should be in favor of this because they have their own executive order encouraging a statutory, meaning a legislative solution to closing gaps in the oversight in the digital financial services space. So we got 21 Democrats voted last week in favor of, as you say, the joint resolution on custody. And so I view that as a base case. I think we can get more Democrats to support Fit for the 21st Century, because you were asking those Democrats last week to vote no against the Biden administration rule. So it was a Congressional Review Act, and that's tough for some of them. This one is about the future. This is about answering the Biden's own executive order. So I'm encouraged.
Let's talk about the other issue area that comes up a lot as it relates to Congress regulating the space, stablecoins.
Yeah.
This is another area where the Biden administration initially led with that President Working Group report from November 2021 calling for a legislative framework for stablecoins.
Right.
Can you discuss, the implications of stablecoin proliferation in the U.S. as it relates to monetary policy, the traditional banking system? Why must Congress act as it relates to stablecoins?
Well, we don't want to leave mystery here because we want consumers, innovators, corporations in the United States, outside the United States, to understand what stable is. How's it defined? And we want to preserve the right for states to have some innovation opportunity here, safety and soundness in the national level, but allow us to do something that we've always done, which is, again, lead the world in dollar-based payment rails. And a stable coin, a tokenized payment for use on a blockchain, is just a natural evolution of that. But some of that's been innovated here in the U.S. and some outside the U.S., even if they're dollar-backed, which is good. That's exporting our currency, and I think that's a positive thing for the long-term treasury market. I think it's a helpful expansion of the payment competition, payment rails around the world. So the main issue there is to move a bill that we hope will be a bipartisan bill as well, that will define what is a stable coin. And then I think many across the world will come to that American definition, and you'll have a much expanded, safer, more transparent payment stablecoin usage around the world.
And I think a stronger U.S. dollar.
100%. Don't you want people right now? What's the widest accepted payment out there in the world? It's the dollar. Whether it's $100 bills in a country out in the middle of nowhere, or a wire transfer back through the banking system, or a real-time digital payment through, again, the banking system, or a dollar-backed payment stablecoin. All that advances U.S. leadership in global commerce.
So this next question, I'm very curious to your response. You have a background in banking. There is a perception that the banking and the digital asset sectors are in competition with one another, if not incompatible. We've heard from some leading voices in the banking industry, Jamie Dimon, to name one, who may not have the most fondest opinions as it relates to this new technology. How do you see these two industries potentially working together, and is this competition that we have going on right now sustainable?
Yeah. Well, look, there's no doubt that blockchain tokenization is disruptive to intermediaries, right? And so a lot of finance has a significant investment in intermediation as opposed to disintermediation. And so there could be concerns in and around that. But this is a way, I think, to reduce costs in a financial institution, between financial institutions and the economy at large, because by using a smart contract in a blockchain environment, there are many forms of finance that benefit those institutions, that reduce friction, reduce fraud, because of the immutable cryptographic nature of the blockchain, deliver a safer, better product. So it's not always about disruption. When I think about use cases on reducing that friction, reducing the agency cost. Second comment. Jamie has certainly made those comments, and yet I would argue that one of the largest innovators in tokenized payments and tokenization generally in American business today is JP Chase. And they have immense research going on that. They have their own tokenized international payment process called Onyx. So I would I understand his comments, but I think just visiting with some of his top echelon, he would learn that JP Chase sees the value in a lot of the things that we're trying to propose to get done next week.
Yeah, it's ironic. JP Morgan is the largest employer of blockchain developers in the country. But you've consistently advocated in your career in Congress for bipartisan cooperation. I went through your statements. I've looked at the bills that you have co-sponsored with colleagues across the aisle. there's a perception in the digital asset space, and that's been increasing more recently, that this technology is becoming partisan. And we've seen comments from President Trump lately. We've seen comments from, or a threat to veto, SAB 121 from President Biden.
Yeah.
What do you think about this evolution or this perception that digital assets is becoming partisan, and how can that be rectified?
I think we doubled down on the fact that we need a consensus in this country that we want to be a global leader in technology. We want to remain a global leader in financial services. We want to be remain the reserve currency in the world and the most accepted currency in the world. So we have the rule of law. We have a good regulatory system. We can adjudicate disputes inside the United States rule of law economic system. Those are all big attributes towards preserving that reserve currency status. Those are not partisan issues. And I go back to the 1990s when Chris Cox, then a member of Congress, a future SEC chairman under George W. Bush, Chris Cox was one of the leaders in the 1996 resolution before the House to not regulate the internet. They really had no idea even what the internet was. Al Gore had not explained it to them yet. He was vice president, he was very busy. So the Congress said, let's have a do no harm approach. So they passed a resolution that says, we're not going to tax or regulate the internet, we're going to tax and regulate activity on the internet. And all I would argue is that when it comes to smart contract blockchain applications, let's take the same approach. Let's treat it as the operating system that it is, and then provide certainty over how your expectations can be managed on how you would use it. And that was a bipartisan effort by Republicans and Democrats, and we need to maintain that. And in this FIT 21 bill is precisely that language from 1996, inspired for the 21st century to treat digital assets with that same care, I would say.
You mentioned the SEC. Everyone in the room, their favorite regulator, Gary Gensler.
Mm-hmm.
The SEC, it's no secret, has been using a regulation by enforcement approach as it comes to digital assets. We've seen Uniswap, Consensus, Robinhood all receive Wells notices in the last few weeks. In this Congress, you have specifically scrutinized the SEC's treatment of the industry, as well as for other disfavored industries.
Yep.
What steps can members of Congress, and I know you're doing it by leading the FIT Act, but what other steps can members of Congress do to strengthen oversight of this regulation by enforcement regime from the SEC?
Well, our oversight committee has asked for all the documentation between the SEC, the commission, Chairman Gensler, his staff, for example, for the period of months or years before the collapse of FTX, to find out why was that situation unraveled before our eyes and we didn't see any engagement of the SEC, whereas a company that like Coinbase that actually went public and had to file an S-1 with the SEC was suddenly more scrutinized. I mean, we don't see a parallel situation of equal treatment there. So that investigation's ongoing. And then Congress has been asking tough, pointed questions, both on both sides of the hill. But in the recent debt box case out in Utah, they said they were arbitrary and capricious. They had some other pejorative terms from the federal judge, and ultimately the two attorneys there resigned. So that's, I think, directly related to Congress's scrutiny of the commission and how they've operated in regulation by enforcement. And it's why we pitch to the CFTC and to the SEC and to the Biden administration at large, FIT 21 is responsive. We're removing uncertainty about these questions that you keep bringing up, and some the SEC's lost in court on. Maybe some instances it's been a split decision. We work hard in FIT 21 to answer those questions, whether it's a custody question, an exchange question, a dealer question, a control issue, a decentralization issue, how you have liquidity, and what's a commodity and what's a security. So we've tried to learn from those enforcement actions, from those court cases, and from visiting with innovators and consumers across the country how to design a common sense, pragmatic, bipartisan approach.
And we truly appreciate that. Chairman McHenry of the House Financial Services Committee announced that he's retiring earlier this year.
Yep.
You also announced that you are running to serve to fill that seat as the lead Republican on the House Financial Services Committee. If successful, as I think many in this room hope, how will you prioritize committee activity around digital assets?
Well, there's just so much more to do. There really is so much more to do when you think about making sure that tokenization of assets can be structured in the right way and be permitted, or how decentralized finance might work in certain applications, or all the elements that I think are important to converting from an analog operating system to a fully digital system: privacy, data ownership. I mean, the dream of being out on a blockchain that I own the data, I have the privacy, I am rewarded for the work and creativity that I have at that node on the blockchain, and that will increase accuracy, reduce fraud. There's so many more ways to go, and I view the payment stablecoin legislation, Chairman McHenry's privacy bill, which we're still negotiating on both sides of the aisle right now as we speak, and the Fit 21 bill is foundational, but there's a lot more to do, and we'd look forward to working with the Digital Chamber on what those that next arena would look like.
Imagine we're sitting here a year from now, May 2025, possibly a change in administration. What do you think has changed, if anything, as it relates to regulating the digital asset and blockchain space?
If we're successful in Fit 21 being enacted into law and a payment stablecoin bill, first I would hope every member of Congress in every one of our 435 districts and in our 100 senator offices, that a staffer and that member would know, oh, I can explain a use case. No, I'm familiar with that. Yes, I met with people in my district and they showed me how they're reducing friction, reducing agency costs, increasing accuracy, auditability, reducing fraud by virtue of using this new technological advance. And I was so pleased to see that in my district, and I'm pleased to see the employment that came from it. So that would be number one, that we're looking backwards and we're seeing innovation and we're seeing people outside the digital chamber seeing those benefits in their lives as a consumer, as a business, maybe in the CEO's office of a large financial institution, where they see that structural economic benefit to help make America more competitive.
How can the folks in this room, I mean, this is a room of industry leaders, how can they help you, help get us to where we want to be in that May 2025, help educate your colleagues?
Yep. Well, you know, when I travel the country and meet with innovators, CEOs, founders, venture capitalists, academics, I'm collecting stories that I can relate to personally about how blockchain or a blockchain tokenization project or a tokenized financial services type project can benefit society, make money, be a positive thing, and tell those stories. So the number one thing over the next business week, as you're talking to members on the House Ag Committee, on the Financial Services Committee, they have a pretty good understanding. But I invite you to go at large to Congress and have people from their districts provide them use cases. And I always say that is the most important thing. Describe how this technology works, connect it to them, because too much of Washington, D.C. is only, when they think about this whole topic, the first words out of their mouth are what? Cryptocurrency. Bad people using cryptocurrency to hide that transaction from other people. Yep. It dominates the discussion here. It is a second order of magnitude, well, but it's on a blockchain and we can find them. And even if they use some sort of pseudo-anonymic activity, we can still track it and we can recover it. But that is not, I would say, the base case for most members of Congress. So this idea that we would use this to reduce friction in an existing intermediated financial activity, you're way over their heads. So talk about blockchain as an operating system, writing applications on it to improve the lives of the American people. And that's what I would, and tell a story. Those of you from California, state of California, is using blockchain, using a fintech company to show their digital ID, their digital driver's license, now available out in that format, in a protected, secure, private format on a smartphone, so that when you go in the convenience store and you want to buy cigarettes or alcohol, you can just, it doesn't show your driver's license. It just confirms you're over whatever the age is in that state. These are the kinds of stories you've got to connect to people, because I have members every day walk up to me on the House floor and say, I don't know what this is for. I don't know of any use case on this. So I think a great way to spend time between now and our vote next week is convincing more members. I've heard from somebody in my district. I know about the use cases. I'm excited to see this next world called Web3 and blockchain.
And that's what we'll be employing the Digital Chamber membership to do. Congressman, thank you for joining us today.
Great to be with you.
Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you all very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Congressman French Hill.